Thank you. We have a chef, thank you for the intro. We have a chef instructor here who says as long as you pick the right ponies that can run the race, they'll win. And it's true, right? It's not the coach that wins those tournaments and all that. It's really the students that win that. So I'm so excited that you guys are here. Sorry it's warm in here. I'm so sorry that you've eaten yourselves into a food coma and that I get to try to keep you awake for an hour. But my name is Dina Altieri. This is my home. I teach at Kendall. I'm the Dean of the School of Culinary Arts. I've been with Kendall 8 years. I wasn't sure if you were following my, 2 plus 4, 2000, whatever, right? So I've been teaching 18 years. Anybody else in the room been teaching somewhere around that ballpark? So congratulations, we've all made that milestone, right? I have been energized by education ever since I left the industry. How many of you guys left the industry because you thought teaching would be easier? Easier in some way. Okay. Easier. Okay. Right. Summer's off, or like, oh, I actually can spend Mother's Day with my mother, but we were all wrong. We were all wrong because this is the hardest job I've ever had, right? And your friends are like, oh, you teach. It's like, have you seen the kids we teach? Would you like to come to school with me one day? Right? Or my neighbor who's mowing his lawn and he's like, my kids are rock stars. I'm like, yeah, I got about 14 of those. You know what I mean? So we have a challenge as educators now, I think more than ever, whatever generation you want to call them, they're millennials, they're Generation Y. We laugh about it here, we call them Generation Don't, like just don't want to do it. It's not interesting enough. But I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the session since you already met me via that bio. We have an hour, but what I'm going to try to do is do about 45 minutes of me talking, but feel free to engage. Don't leave me dying a slow, warm death up here all alone. So if you have something great to say, just shout it out. You don't need to raise your hand. The session will go about 45 minutes. Anybody who's counting, it's about 23 slides, right? So that gives me 3 minutes per slide. So don't try to steer me too far away, educators, because I know some of you in the room, you'll be like, oh, chef, can you tell me about that, blah, 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 and try to steer me too far away from course. Keep an eye on that handout of yours so you know how much farther I have to go. And then we'll do some Q&A. One of the things that was really exciting about writing this PowerPoint slide deck is I love to talk about students. I love to talk about coaching, but really this is not about winning and losing. My presentation isn't, okay guys, I'm going to tell you how to coach a winning team. What I'm going to try to do is talk to you about how a coaching mindset and a coaching strategy as an educator can have an impact on your students. All right? So it might lead to some questions and answers about, hey, how do you do this or do that? And I'm fine with that. But I thought it would be more meaningful for you to step into the mind of me. I'm a coach. I have a funny story to tell you before I start clicking through my deck here. A couple months ago on Facebook, somebody named Paul sent me a friend request. And I looked at his last name and I'm like, Paul Tritter, how do I know? I'm like, oh my gosh. This is a kid that I babysat for. Now I know you're going to tell me, oh, you don't look that old, but I'm in 40 or something, okay? And this guy friended me on Facebook because he remembers me teaching him something. So how many of you in the room were teaching people things when you were like 10 years old, 11 years old? Anybody? Fred, you were in like grade school going, all right, everybody come over here. I got something to tell you, right? I was that person. Ever since I was a young girl, I wanted to teach people things. So this young man, not a young man anymore, probably in his late 30s, friended me on Facebook because he says I taught him how to throw a baseball. Now for all the guys in the room, you're like, yeah, this girl showed you how to throw. Yeah, I showed him how to throw a baseball. Because we don't want to talk about how his father threw a baseball. But I knew I could throw a baseball better than his dad could teach him. So I taught this kid, Paul, how to throw a baseball. And he remembers that. So the point I'm making is I think we're all in this room because we were meant to be teachers, right? But there's a big difference between teaching, right, and having your students learn. And you've all learned that lesson already, right? I can get up here and be like, and you're like, you got it, right? And your students will nod. And then when the quiz comes tomorrow, you're like, oh man. Like they were looking at you with those like blurry eyes, like pretending to listen, but they were sleeping. So we've all been there before, but I do feel like I've always been a teacher. I've always been a teacher. I taught that kid how to throw a baseball. I taught my brother some bad habits, whatever. But we are all meant to teach. But it is difficult, isn't it? So this is one of my favorite quotes. It speaks to the concept of failure. All right? Failure is not fatal, but failure to change might be. I think as educators, we all need to adapt, which is kind of the whole point of this presentation. But we also need, thank you for giving some coaching on the right-handed staple. Yep. But we also have to teach our students that it's okay to fail. In my 18 years of teaching, and I still teach, I think that's the hardest thing. Okay, I don't have children, but I would imagine this is the same thing you try to teach your kid, right? Like when they scuff their knee and they're like, Mommy, I'm horrible at playing soccer. I never want to play soccer again. You're like, just don't worry about it. Just get back in there. Our students are very much the same way. I think they're afraid of failure. Would anybody agree? They're afraid to fail? Okay. So share that quote with them. Okay?
Dina,
yes.
About our students, they're also afraid to succeed. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Mandela said that, well, our students aren't really afraid of failing. They're really afraid that they might be really good.
That's an interesting spin, right? I mean, being afraid to try, being afraid of the unknown, I think it's a very complex conversation, right? So what I wanted to talk about today is change. I think it's really important that we remember that learning means changing. And that learning and changing is slightly painful, isn't it? Anybody go back to school to get a degree after you were working full time? Remember, like all of a sudden the teacher's like, oh, that APA format thing, you kind of got to pay. And you're like, right? So it's changing, okay? I also wanted to discuss with you growth mindset. And I don't know, I'm not going to make the assumption that no one in the room knows what a growth mindset is. But I did want to touch on that because that's the coach in me that tries to get my students to understand that we're all going to grow here. We're going to grow, we're going to change, and you have to kind of get on board and get ready for that process. And then lastly, I want to talk about grit. Anybody heard of grit before? Growth mindset? You've heard of some of these terms? Okay, good. So the good news about me presenting to you today is I just came from graduation. So if I look a little like kind of discombobulated, I was on Michigan Avenue a couple hours ago reading names over a microphone at the Symphony Center and watching a couple hundred of my kids graduate. So what an awesome day to come in here and talk to you guys about student success, right? Like that's the perfect timing, right? Because that's the best day of the year. That is the best day of the year. And as I read those names, I thought, ooh, this kid barely made it through my class, and fumbled through the name that I tried to rehearse over and over in my car, and then we hear I got to make sure I can pronounce Viriampakantsaket, because that's such a difficult last name. And when I read that kid's name, I'm like, A, I got it right, and B, wow, that kid was a stellar student in my class. But what a cool opportunity to speed reflect as you're reading all those names on graduation. So these are the things that we're going to concentrate on today. Let's see if my clicker wants to work at a distance. Okay, couple of, just a little bit of a backstory on change. How many of you guys have heard of Bloom's taxonomy? Okay, we know all about Bloom's. I'm going to take you away from Bloom for a minute and talk to you about this man called D. Fink. Okay, anybody heard of him before? This is a great book. One of the last slides, actually, I'll give you guys some resources so you can look on your own. But this is a great book about significant learning experiences. And I think that's what we try to do as educators. We think we know it all, right? Because we're mostly chefs, aren't we? Like we can do it better, we can do it more productively, we can teach that way too. But what D talks about is learning is change. And he has something what he calls his taxonomy. And that's why I asked you if you knew Bloom's. Because if you know about Bloom's and the scaffolding of defining and reciting all the way up to analysis and all of comparing and contrasting, you might be somewhat familiar with something called the taxonomy of learning. And Fink has his own. And like Escoffier, he probably borrowed from a few people and said, hey, here's what I'm calling it. So you'll see some overlap, right? So this, if you notice, significant learning is in the middle of his little Venn diagram. And when we think about creating a significant learning experience for a student, what we're really trying to do is, especially with this generation right here, is we need to make sure that these students find the material relevant, right? Especially this generation, right? Because they could just pull out their phone and go, this isn't interesting to me, and just with a flick of their finger, they're on to the next thing that is. So if we don't create a learning environment and learning outcomes and things that are significant to these kids, they're going to disengage. They disengage anyway if we're not moving at 12 minutes per activity. So we don't want to give them any excuse to disengage. So this is an interesting way to kind of look at building learning outcomes. So if you want to grab a hold of this book, it will go in a lot of detail. But in general, what I wrote here is, think about it. I don't know how many of you are responsible for curriculum development or course development, but go back to your courses and look at your courses. And look at how many learning outcomes you have in your course. And take a look at where those learning outcomes fall on Fink's diagram. How many of those learning outcomes are straight up knowledge? They can define something, they can recite something, they can memorize something. And how many of those things are actually applied knowledge? Thank God we teach culinary education, right? Right? It's hands-on. Thank God it is, right? Have you ever tried to do a lecture on thickening, starch gelatinization and thickening and not bring those kids into the lab? Because if you did, they would be like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? But you have to, demo, copy, demo, copy, demo, copy, or these kids won't grasp it. So you got to get a sense of this. I've tried to write courses like this using Fink's model, and I love it. I love it. It works really, really well. Integration. An example of integration would be, in the first class, they learn how to julienne, right? How many times do they julienne across your program? So there's two things going on there. Number one, you can't live in a vacuum as an instructor and say, I don't know what they're doing in the other classes because I just teach what I teach. So you have to have a really good sense of collaborative work. Yeah, she's like, okay, this is what we do. Go McHenry County. You have to understand what that next teacher is doing, and so on and so forth. But the other side of that, to me, is repetition. It's repetition of skills. So I can, if you guys want, I provided you with my email address, and I have some business cards up here. I can give you a little bit more insight of how we do curriculum mapping at Kendall, if that's your wheelhouse and you do curriculum in your programs, because I could go off on that for a couple hours. I love talking about mapping curriculum. So I can give you an example. Julienne. We're going to do it in Call 111, we're going to do it in Call 112, Call 118, and practically every other class throughout that associate's program, with the exception of the more theoretical classes. I'm not going to make them Julienne in cost control class. But I guarantee that when that kid graduates, he can Julienne, or she can Julienne. I think you could take that to a much, much more concrete level with the things that you find are important. Maybe your crew finds hollandaise to be a critical skill. You can map that, and you can integrate, and you can build repetition in there. It's not hard to do, but you have to be thoughtful. The human dimension, that speaks a little bit to how your students interact. When we assemble a panel of employers and we ask them what's great and not so great about Kendall grads, the thing they come back with most isn't, oh, your kids can't do a julienne quickly enough. It's your kids don't have enough soft skills. This human dimension is really important because your students don't talk to each other. My phone's over there. I was going to pull my phone out. They don't talk to each other. The other day I was walking, you guys were in the cafeteria earlier, right outside the cafeteria. The other day I saw 5 students all clustered together. I'm old enough to know what like a little hacky sack circle is. Have any of you guys a drum circle hack? I thought they were playing hacky sack. That's like they were kind of close and huddled. No. They were all looking on their phones. They were huddled together in a little cluster, close enough to be talking, and they were all doing something on their phones. I was like, what are you guys doing? And they were like tweeting, Snapchatting, whatever. I'm not trying to sound old because I do that stuff too, but I thought it really interesting. You're right near each other. I mean, you're not even near each other. You could like reach each other. And they're like, oh, we're not talking to each other. We're talking to other people. But the point is like, why would I ever be standing, Holly, next to Holly, like not interacting with her? people typically in close range are talking to one another. It blew my mind. And they were like, Chef, come on, get with it. We're all Snapchatting. I'm like, okay, whatever. I think they're not as savvy in the human dimension. Would you agree? Interaction, communication. Okay, so just the humanness of all that. Caring, that might seem a little touchy-feely, but
It's a human thing. You know, they get this and they...
That's right.
Gaming and so forth.
That's right. My students would rather talk to me on Facebook than talk to me in the hallway. They really would. But it's bizarre to me. You know, anyways, that's when I feel old. Because that's abstract to me, but that's their channel, right? Is the phone and this and that. Caring, they have knives in their hands, folks, remember? So they need to understand what it's like to be a good team player, to interact with each other professionally. I don't know about in your programs, but I have 20% of the student population international in the School of Culinary Arts. And that's a really big deal, caring for somebody that comes from a different cultural background. If I have a student from Jordan that's never looked a woman in the eye, if I have somebody from Uzbekistan who won't shake a woman's hand, you see a lot of those gender, cultural things that are just a little bit unusual. So we really want to teach the students how to care for one another. My favorite one is learning how to learn. Our students come to us, and you did too when you went back to school, a little stubborn. How many of you would make the statement, I don't like math? How many of your students make that statement? All of them. I don't like math. Like, join the club. But, you know, if you learn a little bit of math, you might be able to make a little bit of money. You like money? Okay, well then we like math. But that's that fixed mindset. That's a fixed mindset. Like, I'm not good at math. Well, you're only 18 years old, honey, and you got a long way to go in life. So why don't you learn something, right? Learning how to learn. So I don't know, I'm a think fan, so I'll hope you guys are as well. Fixed mindset versus growth mindset. I provided you with a link a little later on in the slide deck to a TED Talk. And you can watch Carol herself talk all about mindset. This is fascinating to me. Anybody heard of this before? This is some really, really good stuff. So a fixed mindset is your student who says, I'm not good at math. I'm not good at math. In other words, who they are now is who they think they're going to be the rest of their lives. Those are some of my favorite conversations to have with my students. I'm like, if you'd have seen me when I was your age, oh my God. I lived in Venice Beach, California. I had dreadlocks. I was a little freaky. I had my little djembe drum circle thing. You know, I wasn't this person. I wasn't as smart as I am today. I wasn't as responsible or whatever. I think they just think like they live in this very small little world of this is who I am. And that's fine to be proud of who they are, selfieing and doing all this other stuff. But you know, you can't cloud who you are through the Ludwig, what is that called? Like the lens where the filter. You can't like filter out who you are because who you are is very real. And so in a lot of ways, they're a little bit living like the Wizard of Oz, aren't they? Like, this is who I am on Facebook. Look at how happy I am. Really? I don't know. That always kind of concerns me, is that's what they put out, but that's probably not inside who they think they are. It's just who they want everybody else to think they are. So that's a real fixed mindset. Growth has to do with internal motivation, intrinsic motivation. I believe that you can teach your students that. I do believe that if you guys are buying what I'm going to say today, you can help your students understand that it's growth and it's progress and it's their motivation that's going to make them great. When I coach my teams, and I've been coaching Knowledge Bowl for a long time, Desmond and I, we played against each other many, many moons ago. Yeah, we were, you know, the clashing of the titans. And the reality is I don't always pick the smartest kids. So there you go, there's my first secret. Desmond was looking for some secrets. Desmond, I don't only pick the smartest kids. The first criteria is professionalism. If you've ever coached a team, culinary or otherwise, how many months are you with these kids? A long time. So if you irritate me, you're not on my team. Do you know what I mean? I mean, we have to bond here. So I try to pick kids that are vetted through the faculty that I know They're professional, they're going to show up, they're good kids, they have good rapport. And then from there I go into how smart they are in the case of my Knowledge Bowl team. But to me, that's really important. Through experience, through practice, we learn how to grow. Here at Kendall, we have tutoring sessions in the kitchen. And I don't know if you have that on your campuses, where not only can a student who's struggling in English or struggling in math go up to the Academic Success Center and have tutorial help, we have a kitchen tutoring system. Now, what's the first thing you think about when you hear the word tutor? What does it make you think of? If I say, please go to the tutor, Billy. What's that, Chef? Yeah, you're not good enough. You got to go to the tutor. What else? Desmond, what is not smart enough? Anybody else?
Same thing, remedial.
Yeah, like I got to go to the tutor. That is something that I try to work on with my students. I tell them this: if you're an A student, why don't you be an A+ student? Go to the tutor. If you're a B student, why don't you be an A student? Go to the tutor. Like, we all need practice, right? I had a midlife crisis a couple of years ago, and everybody laughs. They're like, you're not that old. I'm old enough to have a midlife crisis. And I wanted to play drums, like a drum kit. My drum teacher is 19 years old. The other day at my drum lesson, he was scolding me, and I said, yes, chef, by accident. I did. Like, you don't have that 16th note. I'm like, yes, chef. And my students laugh at me. They're like, oh, Chef Altieri thinks she's cool. She goes to drum school. I'm like, I am not cool. I'm horrible at it, actually. But learning how to learn something brand new. Has anybody ever done that before? Anybody played drums before? Seriously. Left hand, left foot, right foot. It is not easy. And I love it. I love it. It frustrates the hell out of me. I love that I have to practice or he's going to yell at me. I love it. And that's how your students feel. So every Tuesday night, down the street, 10 minutes from here, I go to a pot-smelling drum place because there's a bunch of youngins in there in this place called the Garage, and the old lady comes in with her drumsticks, and I play drums with, or pretend to anyway, with this kid. It's a growth mindset. Like, you have to keep on learning. Feel uncomfortable. Do it, because that's how your students feel every day. So what do? I go to a tutor every Tuesday night. He happens to be 19 years old, and that's my drum teacher, and he's awesome. If I could play like 20% as good as him, I would feel great. So you kind of see my point? We're never too old for this, right? And it can increase our productivity. So from my experience, I think students believe they want to learn, don't they? Day one, they're all fired up. They open up the knife kit. They're like, show me, chef, show me. But the minute they find out they're not quite good yet, they get that frustrated, I can't do it, because now they have to practice. Because trust me, on Tuesday nights, some nights, I'm like, I'm not really prepared. I don't want to go to drum class because I know I'm not going to be great, and he's going to make me play that damn bossa nova again that I'm so sick of, I don't want to play it anymore. Like, you have to get past that. That's a strong sense of will to get better at something. That's a fixed mindset. That's what your students have, right? Like, I don't know, I don't really want to go to tutoring. I don't really want to practice that Julienne. I think I'm good enough, okay? Here's another example. My students won't hand in a project. They just won't do it. You guys, same thing? They just won't do it. And you can get up in front of the class on the first day of class and talk all about the syllabus, right? That's your shtick, right? 50% of the class is your work performance. 10% is your quizzes. Everybody with me? 10% is your final exam. 10% is a written essay. And they're all like, yeah, chef. Yeah. And then the day of the project, it's like nobody's in this room the day the project is due. Nobody's even showing up. Or they're coming in late. 15 excuses. Oh, chef, I emailed it. It's on my Google Drive, and I'm having issues. And right, my favorite, because I'm a New Yorker, so I can play a little bit. I can get a little New Yorker on them and say, oh, you emailed it to yourself? Okay, email it to me today. And if class ends at 6, I'll say, I want it in my email box by 7. Because theoretically, if what you're telling me is true, Desmond, and you did it, but there's some weird email snafu. Clearly you could get it to me within an hour of class, and but it never comes, does it? It never comes. So, I think they don't do it because they're afraid to fail. And I asked them once, why don't you do a project? Why don't you do the recipe costing? Why don't you try to write the essay? Why? And they say, well, if I don't hand it in, then it's not really like I failed, right? Because I didn't try, I didn't do it. That's not as scary to them as trying and having you put a bad mark on it. That's how your students feel, guys. It is. It's like, well, if I don't try, then I didn't really fail. I just kind of didn't try. And they give up before we even give up on them, right? I'm willing to accept the paper, critique it, revise it, help them, hand it back. You can hand it back. We can go back and forth a couple times. Typically, I have, 100% more effort than they're willing to put in. Is this you guys? You see this? So they're afraid to hand it in because they're afraid to fail. They don't even bother with it, right? And they give up. And for us, I'm sure it's the same at your schools, we have some retention issues. Is that an issue at your school, retention? It's the R word, your provost talks about it, your director talks about it, your dean talks about it. 25% of students coming through the culinary program don't even make it to the second quarter. That's our issue here. I don't know if it's higher or lower where you work. 25% just don't even get to the second quarter. We haven't given up on them that already, right? They haven't failed out, but they've just given up. That's what I'm talking about. Feel like they can't do it, and they give up. Lasting change and growth take time. I have been going to the drum lesson for 2 years. He's getting some good money out of me, this kid. I've been going for 2 years. You think your students will go to tutoring and keep practicing the knife drill over and over again for 2 years? Okay? They don't have that stamina. What is it? They don't have the patience. Can't do it on their phone. Too busy doing other things. I don't know. They can't, yeah, I could actually do my drum lesson at home practically. But I think what I've discovered is that they have these really big dreams. I bet you guys make them write an essay their first class, like what do you want to be when you get your culinary degree? I love their stories, right? They want to be the next Rick Bayless and own 7 restaurants. They want to go do this and that, and you're thinking, wow, and you can't even hand in a paper. Or you won't even try a little harder to get that costing, paper, figured out. So we can talk about our philosophy about why that's happening, but I try to teach them this mantra, progress, not perfection, because I think what happens with, back to that example about they won't do the paper, I think if we can try to show them that you're okay with D-level work on the first go-around, you're okay with C-level work on the first go-around, just get them to hand something in. Help them understand that it's progress that you're going to reward them for, right? I've had students completely melt down in knife skills, like a knife skills practical exam, because they can't tourne, right? And they hate the tournées, right? They're cutting their thumbs and they're super discouraged. Well, were you good at it your first 50 tries? I was horrible at it for a while. I still have to do a couple. Before my demo, I'll do a couple. Right. But that's how I feel about making crepes. That's my other one. If I'm going to demo crepes, I make a few, or a French omelet. I whip a few off before I call them up for demo. So guys, if you need to practice, they need, but it's so obvious to us, or to me anyway, but they don't think that way. They think if they're not perfect, they're just not going to try, they're psyching themselves out, they can't do the tournée, they can't do a great julienne, they can't remember the knife dimensions of a small dice, and all of a sudden they're ready to throw in the towel, right?
They're so built on instant satisfaction.
Right.
That if it doesn't work, they go, well, bag it. I can't.
Yeah, I got to bag it. Right?
What are we doing next?
Do you agree with Chef right now?
Oh, yeah.
So if you tell your kids, God, that julienne's a little rough, some of them are 2 inches and some of them are 3 inches, I need to have them all 2 inches. They're like, oh my God, I can't. You're like, wow, it's just a little coaching there, right?
I mean, I try to explain to them that you're in school to learn. You know, I mean, it seems like a simple thing. So it is okay for it not to come out perfect the first time, but
Right.
they get so discouraged.
They get really freaked out,
Like you said, exactly.
right?
It's also generational. These kids have been patted on the back the whole time when they were growing up. You know, it's like
Yeah.
those commercials where they give them a trophy for participating.
That's right.
You know, they're patting on the back.
That's right.
Just breathing, we're gonna pat you on the
That's
back.
right.
Okay, you're the most wonderful kid, even if they're not. So as soon as like something becomes a challenge for them, they just close down the doors and just not gonna do it.
Right.
In high school, they're all learning remediation. They get to redo all the time.
That's
I
right.
have such an issue with that. They'll come in and say, well, I can just redo it, because that's what they do, because they really are teaching for tests in high school now. So they have to remediate.
Right.
Or they can turn when they feel like, as long as they get it done, because unfortunately for the K through 12, they have to do it that way now. Because
Right.
of the tests. So.
And I think we can kind of get into sort of a happy medium there, right? You can get into a happy medium where you're like, okay, I know it's not going to be perfect, but I just need you to try. Let's just break through that barrier. So for years I've been singing this song, progress, not perfection, and I'll mention it well, one of the kids who graduated today, his name is Jesus, he's from Honduras. One day in class, I saw he wrote it on his binder. And there was like a pile of books and a pile of knife kits, and we're all cleaning, and it caught my eye, and I thought, that's really cool, that he wrote it as a reminder to himself. I just need to make progress. Some days that's got to be good enough, right? So they don't get super psyched out. We can enhance students' success through thoughtful coaching and those meaningful or significant learning experiences that I described before, okay? So look at these two pictures and think to yourself, which one's the teacher and which one's the coach? Probably pretty obvious, right? So teaching, it means a lot of things to a lot of us. And I would call myself a teacher, and I'm not always doing just that. And I'm not always saying, like right now, listen to me, I'm the teacher. But in general terms, the teacher is instructing, demonstrating, giving information. The coach might be a little bit more strategic. How many of you guys have switched up your lesson plan to make sure you adapted to your students' issues or strengths, right? We adapt all the time. That's coaching. That's coaching. That's not straight up like, well, the lesson for today is quiche. Well, if they couldn't make the dough the day before, maybe we need to go back to dough. That's you adapting. That's you providing a strategy. Notice the coach having a two-way communication. I know all my students. I know them very, very well. Even the ones that are maybe a little bit more distant, like I said, I'm a New Yorker. I'm very interested in being extroverted. I'm a type A personality. A lot of my kids, especially my foreign students, they think it's like, why is she making eye contact with me, right? They look down in that. It's hard sometimes to get that sort of we're in this together behavior with students who are maybe a little bit more standoffish just by culture or by their personality. But I'm generally able to reach just about all of them. Some way, we'll find some middle ground. Right? So obviously, you've got coaching and teaching. I do both. Do you? Right? Because I don't think one is wrong. I don't think teaching is wrong. I think there's a time and a place to shut up and listen to the chef. Right? I am the person you need to listen to right now. I'm going to show you how to toss a Caesar salad. I'm going to show you the proper amount of dressing, and you're just going to stay there and go, yes, chef. That's teaching. But there, more times than not, I'm in coaching mode. Hey, let's talk about why you didn't hand in that assignment. Let's talk about why you're bickering with your partner. Let's talk about why you're late every day. Right? That's coaching. That's not teaching. That's different. Because I care. Right? I care. I know some teachers that are like, well, screw it. If they're late every day, I'll just mark the points off. I can't live with that. Anybody with me? I can't live with that. I just cannot live in a world where I'm going to wait for you to start my lecture or be interrupted by you when you come in late. So I set a very high expectation. And it's a little uncomfortable at first, but that's chef mode. Yes?
Use the analogy that you not only need to be a coach, but you need to be a cheerleader. You need to boost them up.
Oh,
Go,
definitely.
You know, because
Definitely.
Because that's when you find out why they're not doing something. So
Definitely.
You dig a little bit deeper. Okay,
Yes.
I'm gonna boost up your spirits. Okay, let's move forward.
Yes.
You know? And it's just like when you're managing a restaurant. You know, all right, I'm gonna talk to you at the end of the night. I'm gonna
Yes.
tell you what you did well. I'm gonna tell you what you need
Yes.
to improve on. Then you gotta tell them what you did well.
Yes. Sandwich method, right?
Totally sandwich all the time.
Good,
But you see it
good,
not being done at all.
good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or bad, good, right?
You know,
However you want
You
it.
want the high-low.
That's right.
The high, you know, but a lot of people just lose their patience, lose their temper, blast off instead of like, calm down.
Calm down. I'm here for you. Like I said, I think we want it more than they do sometimes. That's happened to me on the national stage before with the Knowledge Bowl team when they lost one year and they were like, they shrugged it off. I was in the corner like, oh my God. And they were like, Chef, we're all right. I'm like, okay, great. You're all right. I'm not all right. All right? The coach needs a timeout right now. That was devastatingly poor what y'all did up there. Like they were just willing to shrug it off. That's the other thing, is I feel like I'm so intense that I want them so badly to get the concept of food costing that I just don't understand why they don't try. And I think the harder I push and the more I care, they'll give me a little bit. They're like, wow, this lady's going batty. I better hand in the assignment. And in some classes, I make it mandatory. Like, don't hand the assignment in, don't come to class. Like, you have to bring it. And again, a little uncomfortable, but you get 100% completion on the assignments if you make them do it. So who are our students? So I wasn't sure the audience. I knew you'd all be teachers, but some of you are secondary, some of you are post-secondary. Some of our students are traditional aged, like my drum teacher is 19. So jealous of his skill. Some of our students are adult learners. Who teaches adult learners? Okay, both. They're mixed all, and that's always fun, isn't it? They're all mixed. So the one kid you got to teach the grit. The one kid you got to teach the grit. The other one you got to be like, relax, relax. I know you've been a lawyer for 30 years. It's just a julienne carrot. Relax. Okay. Domestic or international. Hopefully I'm being PC here. Academically inclined or not. Like, wow, you don't know what the word smooth means. Okay. Let me show you what smooth is. And again, that might just be cultural, that might just be a vocab issue, I don't know. All right, so who are they? Do these characteristics affect the way they learn? Totally. Totally. That's your favorite moment as a teacher, huh? When you finally realize, oh, they all learn differently. Okay. That's cool, right? You thought they learned like you learn. Like, why can't they listen to me for an hour and be interested? Why can't they go home and study for the quiz? I told them it was on it. Oh, because they're different than you are, right? And then they're different from each other. But that's why we're doing what we're doing, because we think it's fun. And we like the challenge. How do they learn? Are they a little less interested in the academic stuff? A lot, right? A lot. They'd rather not write a paper. They'd rather not do math. Why do I need to do this? I just want to be a chef. I always tell them, you know, culinary school is expensive. If you just wanted to cook, you could stay home and watch television. You know, Rick Bayless or, you know, Bobby Flay might be able to show you how to grill. He's not going to show you how to cost the item or lead a team or, right? So if you're spending a lot of money, you want me to teach you more than just, you know, how to cook, right? Hands-on, we know that. I think they like being in team mode. You'll see that when you assign a math project and 5 of them have the same paper. Right? They're good. They're good in like group mode. Like, oh, I thought we could write the paper together, chef. No. So sometimes that group mentality, that group mindset's not great. But in a kitchen, it can be good. They really are, the younger generation, mostly concerned about kind of each other and how each other's doing. I've seen that a lot. One of the kids goes down in the class, you will see the others kind of run to their aid. I see that a lot with, what did I call them before? Generation don't. You don't want to hand in anything. They need to be actively participating, right? Definitely uncomfortable with failure. We gave them trophies for participating, right? We damaged these poor kids. But I'll go one step further. I think we gave them trophies for participating, but I think they know they didn't deserve it. I do. I do. I had that epiphany like a year ago. I used to be resentful of that, like, you guys got trophies. And then I thought, oh my God, but they know that they're inadequate. And that's what's so sad. That's why they don't have the confidence, because it wasn't real. They knew it wasn't real. I do believe that they.
Well, I think it makes them also second guess even their successes when they're actual successes.
Exactly, because they're like, oh, are you lying to me here? Yeah.
Got a trophy for doing nothing.
Yes. Yes. Are you lying to me here, chef, or did you just give me a 9 out of 10 on, like, was that 9 out of 10 on Julienne real?
Yeah.
Oh, it's very real. You did great, right? Are these traits consistent with the personality of our industry? Our industry. Hands-on, team-oriented, active. Do line cooks get a little pouty sometimes? You bet they do. What do you mean that customer on 11 said it wasn't a medium rare? Come on. So they're not really that far off, our students, right? What are we preparing them for? Demanding, stressful work, physically and mentally, where they have to adapt and grow. This is what we're preparing them for. So why don't we teach them this way, right? So here's a nice kitchen scene. Chefs, look past the fact that the exec isn't wearing a hat. I know your serve safe, radar is up. But here's my question. Does the chef coach the team during service, or does he teach the team? It's coaching, man. You're not saying, oh, let me show you how to saute again. Fire 14 duck breast. You're coaching, right? So what I'm trying to prove here is that growth mindset, change, adapting, teaching kids not to be afraid to fail. It's what our industry is. This is what we are training them to be good at, right? Good. I know he doesn't have a hat. I caught that late. I was like, oh, he doesn't have a hat on. Coaching strategies. Here's another quote. It's about success. My favorite question when I do orientation and I meet all the students that are considering coming to culinary school. I don't know if you guys have like, open houses at your colleges and you have to go and you have to speak. My favorite is when there's like a parent in the room that makes eye contact with me and says, will my daughter be successful if she graduates from your program? And then I get into my whole diatribe about, well, that depends on how you define success. So her next question is, will my daughter make a lot of money in this industry? And then we go, you know what I mean? But this is, to me, a great quote about success. To me, you're only really failing when you stop trying. Success to me is defined by that desire of doing your best. So I love that. This is a little bit about grit. Grit is the concept or a trait that I think we all possess. I hope we do as educators. Has nothing to do with intelligence. Nothing. It's all about perseverance and passion and your willingness to get better. That's what grit is. Okay? Can you teach grit? I showed this to a couple of teachers that I work with here at Kendall. Half of them said no and half of them said yes. So it's more just a question to pose to you. Like, can you teach your students to have a long-term commitment? Can you teach them to appreciate that progress, not perfection mantra? I'm trying. Passion. Okay, that's fair. That's good. That's good enough sometimes, right? I love to tell them the stories about, me taking, drum class or motorcycling class and how the teacher pointed stuff out. I'm like, you got to appreciate that. You got to appreciate that somebody wants you to learn, right? Long-term commitment. Passion, that's a tough one. Remind your students that passion is pleasure and pain, by the way. Passion doesn't just mean, I love this. Because I had a student talk about dropping out of school in his third quarter here, so after about 9 months, because it wasn't fun anymore. I'm like, I don't know about you, but I'm not always having fun at work. Are you guys? It's rewarding, it's engaging, it's challenging, but it's not always fun, right? Motivation and tenacity, an achievement approach, the ability to handle failure. We've mentioned failure a lot. How about that last one? Could you get your students to just sort of like self-analyze without constantly needing your feedback? Feedback is great, but what if you're not right there, right then to say, stir the sauce, stir the sauce, stir the sauce? Scorching, scorching, you know? Can they kind of like self-reflect without needing that constant feedback? That's a big deal. That's a really, really big one. That's grit. That's a picture of my Knowledge Bowl team a couple of years ago taken upstairs where you guys had your reception. One of my students on the team plays in like a heavy metal band. And he's like, Chef, because the Knowledge Bowl is like a college bowl team, it's super geeky. Like these kids have like 4.0 GPAs. They're like, let's take a picture that makes us look mean. So that was our kind of goofy picture. It is, yeah, that's what they wanted. They're like, let's get in the pyramid and look all, you know. Can we create learning activities that build grit? I think we can. Here's some tips. Create a learning plan with concrete learning outcomes. Create a gritty environment. Create opportunities for your students to fail. Create opportunities for your students to succeed. Constantly be in that mode where you're thinking these kids need to develop a growth mindset. I think you can create a really cool environment where you can develop their grit tendencies. Be clear with your expectations. So I teach an American cuisine class. I was telling you earlier that I have a class where the assignment is mandatory. I set that expectation right away. I say, everybody look in the syllabus. There's 3 papers that are due. You have 10 weeks to complete them. There's the due dates. And guess what? You have to do them. You don't have a choice. And they all nod. And then the first kid that comes to class without it on the first day, you kind of make, not a bad example like scolding and cursing, but you say, I'm so sorry. Why don't you go to the library and bring it back complete? And they're like, no, she really meant it, and I dismiss you. And now they realize, whoa, she really meant it. Without making a huge drama and embarrassing. We've got to be FERPA friendly, right? Anybody know FERPA? Okay, we can't be like, what are you doing? Oh, your other chef said you were a slacker and you're doing it to me. You can't say that, but you can say, you know what, remember we talked about this? That the assignment was mandatory? So can you leave and come back with it? Great, thank you, done. Hold them accountable. Remind them how near or far from the goal they are. They need to be reminded. I need to be reminded too in my own teaching practice how close or how far I am away from my goals. I push real hard, guys, if you haven't noticed already. I push very, very hard. I push them knowing that they're not going to be able to handle what I'm giving them. I want to see, 4 potatoes tornade in 10 minutes. Go. Knowing that they can't finish that in that amount of time, but pushing them so that they start to feel what it feels like to be behind the 8 ball. I think that that's a very valuable teaching tool. Give frequent, honest feedback, written, verbal, whatever method, whatever channel. Have them self-reflect. Ask them how they did. They're going to tell you, I did awful. No. Come on. Was your tournée a 5 out of 10, a 6 out of 10, a 7 out of 10, an 8 out of 10? Normally, they're going to self-critique much harder because it's easier, isn't it? I'm really bad, aren't I, chef? No, you're not. Oh, no, I am. They kind of want to, it's that game. That's the game. So I just say, no, it's a 7, and here's why. Want them to understand how I grade and ask them to reflect on that. We talked about the revised work and growth mindset, and listen. Listen to them. I think a lot of times it's our own agenda. We are coming today to teach consomme, and we're ready, and the demo's all prepped up, and we're ready to go, and we're like, and at the end of the day, we're like, I don't know if they got it or not, but I did what I needed to do. That's teaching, right? Winning and losing. This is a hard one, especially if you guys coach teams, because you all build a team at the beginning of the season with the intent to do what? Win. Winning. It feels good to win. But guess what? If you're going to go to a tournament and there's 10 participants, there's 9 losers. So the chance of losing is far greater than the chance of winning. So let's try to prepare them for that part also. I could use this advice myself sometimes. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a sore loser, but I do take loss a little hard sometimes, especially if I know they didn't live up to their potential. I'm a great winner. But I've learned more from losing than I have from winning. I learned way, 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 way more from losing. So I provided you with a link, the one link on the additional resources page there. And I'm more than happy to email you guys this PowerPoint. But the link that says Altieri is a link to a blog I wrote called The True Cost of Competition. And it goes into a little bit of detail about how I feel about coaching a team specifically. My philosophy is if you don't try, you're a loser. Try, right? Just try. Just give it a shot. How many of your students are too afraid to just compete and try? Again, afraid of failure, afraid of losing. So I really believe that the only real loser is the one that stopped trying. One of the things I think is really important about competing is the criticism. I compete for the critique. That's the whole point of why I compete, is so somebody can criticize me. Or I can be measured against my peer. That's why I do it. Embrace the experience. Sometimes you win. Those kids won a Laureate Cup in Panama a couple weeks ago. We trained them for 9 months. Girls from the Philippines, and Tony's a veteran from Madison, Wisconsin. So you got one kid from the Philippines and one kid from Madison, Wisconsin. These two couldn't be more different. Put them together, made them work together. They did a 2-course menu in Panama. And they won a big Laureate Cup. Fantastic, right? And they worked their butts off. But we were prepared to lose. We were totally prepared to lose. We're like, there's no way in hell we're going to win this thing. And embrace the experience. Networking with peers and supporting the team. So that's just that last little bit about why compete, why push your students to compete, why compete yourself. I think that there's a value in that. Those are all the links, and that's it. Any questions? It's getting hotter and hotter in this room, isn't it? No? Questions? Thank you, Fred. Any questions?
So I teach high school, and I think a lot of times students don't do the work simply because they're lazy.
Yes.
I don't think it's that they're afraid to fail. They just would simply rather play video games, Facebook, and I get what you're saying because I was one of those people in high school and still am. It's like, well, if I don't put myself out there, well, then I can't lose. Right. I still do it because, like you, I like to compete.
Right.
You know, with your peers, and you get feedback from people that you know are better than you.
Yes.
Which is good. I guess maybe how do people in here motivate people that you know are just truly lazy?
Anybody want to take that? Got somebody in the back of the room.
I think I teach high school too, and I am a student too. I know him do 100 times better than he does. And I try to encourage him. He's like, Jeff, I'm okay with the D. I go, are you kidding me? I'm like, you do so much more. He said, yeah, but then you're going to want more. And you're going to expect more, not only here, but everywhere else. So I'm good with the D. So, I mean, it's not.
Well, I've heard that too. They're like, well, I don't care. If I get a 0, I'll still have a C in your class.
And you know what? Maybe the piece there is, okay, right? You get a D. I'm going to keep trying to push that kid, though. I don't know about you. I'm going to keep trying. I'm just going to keep on trying. But yeah, I mean, it is sad. That's right. That's right.
Where do they want to go?
That's right.
They eventually have to like their own.
Lazy is hard. What I do with lazy here is they fail out. Like they just don't make it here. And that's that conversation of,
Put a C minimum for less
yeah,
classes, like
yeah, like you,
Like in high school, like they have to be in my class.
that's right, that's right. That's that difference.
If they don't like it anymore, well, I can't do anything about that. I can't move them, right?
But here, let me ask you one question on that lazy note, okay? High school or post-secondary. So how many of you guys in your classrooms have your students work in pairs sometimes? You have to, right? So that kid that's lazy, who do you pair him with?
Usually with someone that's
Not lazy.
You're gonna take over.
Because this is what I want to get at.
I try not to put them with someone that's just going to take over and do all the work, so try to put them
Good.
with someone that they have to actually do something.
Okay, good.
something
Because I thought you were going to say, if I could predict, I thought you were going to pair him with somebody who's a little bit stronger. I don't do that. I pair the weak with, when I can sort of assess, I pair the weak with the weak and the strong with the strong and let the weak kind of bring themselves up. I think that's a good, to me, that's a strategy to get the lazy kid to look around a little bit at least. But lazy's hard. Lazy is very hard. Yes?
Can we go back to the taxonomy of significant?
Yes.
Could you kind of give me some examples on how you build that caring and compassion into your classroom?
Yes. This one right here, right? Caring. So one of the things we do at Kendall is we have institutional outcomes, and one of the outcomes that we have is all in that sort of soft skill domain, right? So leadership is a great example. So when you put your students into a group, do you teach them how to work as a group, or you just have this expectation that they're going to like reach the finish line as a group? Caring is a piece there. So if a learning outcome is learning how to work with one another, you can grade that. You can have a little peer score become a part of the rubric that day. That's what I do. One of the hardest things I do with my students, I do it on the day we do international soup, just an example I can think of, is I have them give an assessment to their peers. And the first thing they say is, I don't want to tell her what I think about her soup, or I don't know enough to even think I could speak intellectually about what might or might not be wrong with that soup, but I force them to do that. I'm like, you saw the demo, you made the soup yourself, you heard my critique of what I thought a good soup or a poor soup was, and everything in between. So go ahead, give her your opinion.
She's gonna be mad at me.
Well, yeah, I mean, but what they'll do is they won't say anything bad. So I make them say something constructive. I just make it. I know it seems like I'm a crazy person, but I just do. I'm like, I need something good and something that needs work. Just force them. The caring part, I think the Generation Y, I really do think they care. They almost care a little too much. They don't want anybody to give them bad critique. They don't want to give each other bad critique. So you can build that caring in. The quickest, easiest example I can give you is peer assessment. That's a good caring outcome. Yeah. But you should check out that book, the Significant Learning, Fink's book. It's outstanding. It's really, really good because it'll give you some examples, some activities. Good question. How are we on time? We're good? Okay. That's typical, right? The chef goes over. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.